Why did everyone freeze when she screamed? That's the question people would argue about later, online, on news panels, in the comment sections of videos that spread like wildfire. But in the moment, in the heat and noise of a Saturday street fair, the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that a little girl's voice cracked open a crowd's silence, and a father who didn't want to be a hero anymore found himself stepping back into a world he thought he'd left behind. Riker Cade hadn't planned on anything heroic that afternoon. He had planned tacos, maybe ice cream, a quiet day, a day where nothing reminded him of who he used to be or who he had trained to be. His daughter Bryn was 4, wild curls, scraped knees, and a voice that could fill a room with laughter or shatter it with fear. He promised himself he would give her normal childhood memories, ones not shadowed by the SEAL teams, by deployments, by things he never wanted her to understand. But normal had a way of slipping away from him. The sun over Clearwater Harbor beat down hard enough to turn the street into a river of heat. Families drifted between food trucks, kids clutched balloon animals, and somewhere a cover band butchered an old country song. Riker stood in line at a taco truck, counting the people ahead of him with the quiet patience of someone who had spent years timing things that mattered far more. 7 people ahead. 8 minutes maybe, enough time for Bryn to lose interest in anything. He kept one eye on her anyway. She was crouched by a lemonade stand, drawing chalk suns on the hot pavement like the world was made of bright circles. Her dolphin balloon tapped lightly against her shoulder. She looked safe. She looked happy. Riker let himself breathe. Old habits tried to claw their way up anyway. Exit points, crowd density, suspicious movement, the instinctive cataloging of threats that never quite went away. He pushed it down. This wasn't a mission. This was a fair, a day for Bryn. A day where he got to be just a dad, tired, undercaffeinated, and wearing a Henley that hid a tattoo he no longer wanted to explain. Then Bryn stood, chasing her balloon as it bumped away on a breeze. Riker's body tensed before his mind caught up. He almost lunged, stopped himself. She was 3 steps away. Safe. Not a war zone, not a target, a child. His child. He exhaled slow. The line moved, 6 people now. Near the churro stand, a young woman in a yellow sundress bumped into Bryn. Iced coffee splashed on the ground. Riker stepped out instinctively before realizing the woman was already crouched, already smiling, already touching Bryn's shoulder with gentle reassurance. She said something that made Bryn nod shyly. Her name, though Riker didn't know it yet, was Lena Gorski. He didn't know that in 2 minutes she would be staring at him with terror in her eyes. He didn't know that she would be the face haunting his dreams for weeks. He didn't know she would thank him on camera later, voice trembling, makeup streaked, words that would be replayed millions of times. Right now, she was just a kind stranger in a yellow sundress. Bryn went back to her chalk. Riker went back to the line. He told himself he was overreacting, told himself he was getting better at being normal. But the world had a way of testing men like him. 3 men near a pretzel cart noticed Lena as she passed. Loud, drunk, the kind of swagger that came from too many beers and too few consequences. They moved like they owned the sidewalk, shoulders wide, voices louder than they needed to be. Gym arms, sunburned faces, cheap cologne fighting the smell of fried dough. Riker noticed them without meaning to. Noticed the way the tall one tracked Lena with predatory interest. Noticed the way the second one pushed off the wall too quickly. Noticed the way the third one pocketed his phone like someone preparing to stir trouble, not stop it. Old training stirred in his blood. His forearm itched beneath his sleeve. He told himself it wasn't his problem. Lena kept walking, texting, unaware. The 3 men slipped into her shadow like they'd rehearsed it, one on each side, the tall one in front. Riker straightened. The line in front of him blurred. The voices faded into background noise. His attention left his body and moved across the street, tracking movement, distance, angles. The air changed. His heart rate didn't. He tried to stay calm. The tall man called out something. Lena stiffened, picked up her pace, didn't turn, didn't engage. The crowd parted around them, strangers pretending they didn't see what was unfolding. Riker stepped out of line and walked toward them without realizing he'd moved. No speed, no aggression, just purpose. Lena tried to slip past the churro stand, but they cut her off with practiced ease, trapped her with bodies, booze, and entitlement. The tall one caught her wrist. She jerked back. He held on harder. People looked, no one acted. Phones lifted, thumbs hovered over record buttons. Riker didn't run. Running was loud. Running escalated. He moved with quiet precision, the kind that made people underestimate him until it was too late. But before he reached them, a sound split the air. "Daddy, they're hurting her." Bryn's scream tore through the crowd, a clear, terrified blade of sound. Every phone swung toward the little girl pointing, then toward Lena, then toward the three men, then toward Riker, who was now standing directly behind the tall one. He didn't shout, he didn't posture. "Let her go." The tall man turned, annoyed. Alcohol softened his balance. Ego sharpened his stupidity. "Mind your business, dude." Riker's voice didn't change. "I'm asking once." Those who had ever seen a trained operator knew the shift instantly. The subtle weight change, feet anchoring, eyes scanning both threats and escape routes. A stance built from thousands of hours of training. The tall man shoved him, hard enough to humiliate, not enough to knock down. Riker barely moved. The crowd sensed it then. This wasn't normal. Whoever this quiet dad was, he wasn't built like everyone else. Lena tried to pull free again. The man's grip tightened. She winced. The second guy stepped closer, chest puffed. The third lifted his phone, grinning, recording. Riker's last warning was almost a whisper. "You're going to let her go, or I'm going to make you." And then the punch, sloppy, telegraphed. The kind someone throws when they've never been punched back for real. Riker sidestepped, guided the man's momentum. The tall guy's face met the churro cart with a dull metallic thud that made the crowd flinch. 12 seconds. The second man lunged. Riker caught his arm, twisted, redirected, not breaking, just enough to drop him, screaming. 28 seconds. The third charged, all anger and foam. Riker pivoted, used his own weight against him, and pinned him to the ground with controlled pressure. 47 seconds. 3 men down, a woman free, a crowd silent. Bryn trembling, balloon bobbing in the wind. Lena crying quietly, phones recording everything. And Riker standing there, not triumphant, not proud, not angry, just controlled, calm, carrying a weight that never fully left him. Sirens wailed in the distance. He raised his hands slowly as police approached, the old training written in every calculated movement. He didn't speak, didn't justify, didn't explain. He just looked at his daughter, scared and small beside the lemonade stand, and felt something break inside him. He had promised himself he would leave that life behind. But some lives don't stay buried. And some days don't go the way you plan. Why did the police hesitate when they saw him? It wasn't fear, though that would have been understandable. It was something quieter, more complicated. Something like recognition, as if a few of them already knew who Riker Cade used to be and wished they didn't. The first cruiser slid to a stop with a chirp of brakes. Officers stepped out, hands near holsters but not gripping. Their eyes moved quickly. 3 injured men on the ground, a shaken woman, a 4-year-old girl clinging to a balloon, and one man standing perfectly still in the center of the chaos, hands lifted, jaw tight, posture controlled with almost military precision. Lena tried to speak first, her voice cracked. He wasn't. An officer placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, it's okay, let us handle it." Riker stayed silent. Words had a way of being twisted, especially once cameras entered the picture. And right now, there were too many phones, too many people ready to turn a truth into whatever version brought them more views. So he stayed still, stayed calm, stayed exactly the opposite of the men who had started all this. The officer closest to him glanced down at the unconscious tall guy, then looked back up with a small, almost involuntary frown. One hit, maybe two. He wasn't sure which impressed him more, the efficiency or the restraint. "Sir," the officer said, "I'm going to ask you to lower your hands and step over here." Riker nodded, slow, controlled. The way they needed him to. He walked toward the patrol car, Bryn's wide eyes following him the whole way. Every step felt heavy, every breath felt wrong. The last thing he wanted was for her to see her father surrounded by police. She shouldn't have had to live through this. She shouldn't have had to scream for help at a street fair. She shouldn't have to watch him get questioned like a criminal. He swallowed hard. Bryn pulled against the lemonade vendor's grip and ran straight toward him. "Daddy!" Her little arms wrapped around his leg, trembling. The officers paused. Riker knelt. "Hey," he whispered, brushing her curls back. "I'm right here." "Are they taking you?" Her voice cracked. "You didn't do anything wrong." The officers shifted awkwardly, glancing at one another. A child's fear did things to grown men, even trained ones. One officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we're not arresting you. We just need to understand what happened." Bryn loosened but didn't let go. Riker nodded. "Okay." Lena approached then, still shaking, iced coffee dripping down her dress, mascara smudged into soft shadows under her eyes. Her voice steadied for him. "He saved me, those men." "We'll take your statement," the officer assured her. She hesitated, looked at Riker, and in that brief glance was something he'd learned to read in war zones: trust born from danger, a bond that forms only when someone steps between you and harm. But before she could speak again, someone shouted from the crowd, "I got the whole thing on video." And those 9 words changed everything. Phones lifted, people leaned in, officers tensed. The third man on the ground, groaning, lifted his head. "He attacked us," he slurred. The tall one, still disoriented, tried to rise. "That psycho blindsided me." Lena flinched. "That's not what happened. They grabbed me." The officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, we'll sort it all out." But the crowd wasn't interested in sorting. Not really. They wanted drama, controversy, something to post, to share, to argue over. Alienated, fragmented attention looking for the next flash of outrage. Riker saw it happening, the story slipping out of his hands. He'd lived enough years in the military to understand one truth: perception always moves faster than facts. Bryn looked up at him, confused. He couldn't let her see him lose control, not even a little. "Sir," an older officer said softly, gesturing toward the cruiser, "may we talk over here, away from her?" Riker nodded again, lifted Bryn gently into Lena's arms. "Stay with her, okay?" he whispered. Bryn clung to his shirt for one final moment before letting go reluctantly. Lena held her tightly, as if she understood exactly how much that trust cost him. Riker stepped aside with the officers. He answered their questions with simple, clear, factual statements. No embellishments, no emotion, no military jargon. He didn't mention the part where he had noticed the men long before anything happened. Didn't mention the way the tall one's grip tightened painfully on Lena's wrist. Didn't mention the last 6 months of building a quiet civilian life he hoped would stick. He didn't talk about his training. He didn't talk about the things he'd done overseas. He didn't talk about the nights when even his own breathing felt too loud. He just told them what mattered. 3 men, 1 woman, 1 frightened child, a situation he couldn't walk away from. The officers listened. One took notes. The older one nodded slowly. "Mr. Cade," he murmured, "you didn't use excessive force. Based on witness accounts so far, you protected someone who needed it." Riker nodded, but some part of him refused to relax. The world didn't operate on logic anymore, not once the internet got involved. The officer lowered his voice. "Your former military, right?" Riker hesitated. "Yeah." "Navy." He gave a small nod, something like that. The older officer met his eyes with quiet understanding. "I've seen guys like you before, calm when everyone else panics. You did what most people couldn't." Before Riker could respond, a harsh burst of laughter came from behind them. "Oh, this is going to be good," someone muttered, phone raised. Another shouted, "He's going viral." Riker turned slowly. A video was already circulating through the crowd. He didn't need to hear the audio to recognize the moment on screen. The tall man grabbing Lena, her panicked struggle, Bryn's scream, and then Riker moving like a shadow through the chaos. Clips pauses, slow-motion rewinds. The kind of footage people edited and sensationalized, without knowing the first thing about context. Riker's stomach tightened. Lena took a tentative step toward him, Bryn still in her arms. "Riker, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for." "You don't have anything to apologize for," he said gently. But the truth was already taking shape around them. People weren't watching Lena, or Bryn, or even the men on the ground. They were watching him. His composure, his movements, his silence. "Who is he?" a teenager asked loudly. Someone else answered, "Bro, look how fast he dropped them. He's definitely special forces." A third chimed in, "Bet he's some disgraced vet trying to prove something." Lena flinched, clutching Bryn closer. Riker stood still. He could handle insults aimed at him. He'd been called far worse. But when strangers started dragging his daughter or the woman he'd helped into the speculation, that was different. A black SUV pulled up across the street. Quiet, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong at a street fair. Riker saw it immediately. The subtle shift in his breathing was the only sign. The rear door opened, and Admiral Jonathan Fawkes stepped out. A man Riker hadn't seen in years. A man he never thought he'd see again. A man who did not show up to civilian street fairs without a reason. Lena noticed the change in Riker's posture. "Do you know him?" Riker didn't answer. The Admiral walked toward him with the calm authority of someone used to commanding rooms, battles, and reputations. His presence cut a path through the crowd without a word. People whispered. Phones lifted again. Riker felt the past catching up quicker than he could breathe. And Admiral Fawkes stopped 3 feet from him. "Cade," he said quietly, too quietly for the cameras, "we need to talk." Riker's jaw tightened. He had known this day would come eventually. He just didn't expect it to begin with his daughter screaming at a street fair. Why didn't the Admiral look surprised? That was the thought that lodged itself in Riker's mind the moment Fawkes stepped out of the SUV. As if the 3 men on the ground, the shaken woman, the trembling child, and the phones capturing everything were just details, variables, noise around the real reason he had come. Admiral Jonathan Fawkes didn't do coincidence. The man planned his life the way engineers built ships, precise angles, no unnecessary movement and no room for chaos. So if he was here, right now, in the middle of a street fair, it wasn't accidental. He approached, posture straight, face unreadable behind aviator sunglasses. A few spectators backed away instinctively, sensing authority even if they didn't recognize him. Those who did recognize him watched with the intensity reserved for celebrities or ghosts. He stopped in front of Riker. "Cade," Fawkes began quietly, tone too low for phone mics, "you've had quite a day." Riker didn't answer. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to Bryn, still in Lena's arms, cheeks flushed from crying. "You here to arrest me?" Riker asked, voice flat. Fawkes' mouth twitched, the closest he ever came to annoyance. "If I were here for that, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Riker didn't blink, didn't move. He didn't trust him. Not anymore. The officers stepped back, unsure how to proceed. Even they seemed to sense that whatever conversation was happening didn't belong to them. Falk motioned to the side. "Walk with me." "No," Riker said. A ripple went through the crowd. Phones angled in, trying to catch the tension. Falk removed his sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes sharp enough to cut steel. "This isn't a request." "Neither was mine," Riker replied. The silence that followed was thick enough to stall the moment. Even Lena stiffened, clutching Bryn as the hardened authority of the Admiral met the immovable resistance of a man who once served under him. Falk exhaled through his nose. "Cade, you just put 3 civilians in the hospital." "They put themselves there," Riker replied. "And the internet thinks you snapped." Riker's jaw flexed. That was the truth he already feared. Falk continued, voice still low. "You can either control the narrative or let the world create one for you." For a second, something old and tired flashed in Riker's eyes, an exhaustion he had learned to hide. "I'm done with narratives," he said. "I know," Falk replied. "That's the problem." Riker looked away, looked toward Bryn, toward Lena, toward the street, sunny, chaotic, loud. A place he wanted to be normal, even though normal was the one thing he'd never been. Falk stepped closer. "Riker, we have a situation." Riker's reaction was instinctive. "Not my problem anymore." Falk's eyes hardened. "It is now." Riker almost laughed. "No, you don't get to decide that." "I'm not the one deciding," Falk replied. "Circumstances are." The crowd leaned closer, whispering, recording, hungry for meaning in something they didn't understand. A confrontation between a former operator and a high-ranking admiral. This was the kind of thing that would explode online. The kind of footage people replayed without context. The kind of moment that could ruin a life. Falk knew it too. His gaze flicked across the phones. This conversation needs to happen somewhere quieter. Riker didn't answer. Lena finally stepped closer, voice shaky. "Admiral, he saved me." Falk acknowledged her with a brief, respectful nod, polite, distant. "Ms. Lena Gorsky, you're unharmed." "Because of him," she gestured at Riker, "those men." Falk lifted a hand gently, stopping her. "Your statement is appreciated. It will be included." Lena hesitated. Included in what? But he didn't answer. Riker saw that too. He stepped between Falk and Lena instinctively, the same way he had between her and the 3 drunk men. A quiet, unspoken protective reflex he had never been able to shake. Falk lowered his voice again. "Cade, you and I are leaving now." Riker shook his head. "I'm not leaving my daughter." Falk's expression softened only slightly. "Bryn can come, that's not the issue." Riker blinked once, slow, controlled. "Then what is?" Falk studied him for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal here, in front of cameras and strangers. "Your face is already circulating," he murmured. "Everything about your past that wasn't supposed to be public is being pieced together in real time." Riker's stomach dropped. He didn't need details. He understood instantly. His deployments. His classified operations. The missions he never spoke about. The identity he worked years to shed. Falk straightened. "We can either get ahead of this, or we can watch your life catch fire." Riker closed his eyes briefly. Just 1 second. But it was enough for the past to claw its way into the present. He opened them again. "Why me? Why now?" Falk's voice softened almost reluctantly. "We've had a development." Riker's pulse slowed. Not sped up, slowed. Danger did that to him. His physiology had been rewired by years of surviving things most people never imagined. "What kind of development?" "Not here," Falk repeated. That answer wasn't good enough. But Bryn's voice cut through everything. "Daddy," she called, fear creeping back up her throat. He turned to her, and something inside him tugged painfully. Bryn wasn't meant for this life. She wasn't supposed to see admirals show up for her father. She wasn't supposed to watch crowds point phones at him. She wasn't supposed to learn at 4 years old that some people are never allowed to be anonymous. He knelt again, brushing her cheek. "I'm right here, sweetheart. Are we going home?" God, he wished they could. "Soon," he whispered. "I promise." Falk waited, silent, but not patient. Riker rose slowly. "If I go with you," he said carefully, "I decide what Bryn sees. She doesn't walk into another room full of uniforms." Falk nodded once, understood. And Riker added, "She stays with me." "Of course." Riker studied him closely, looking for cracks, lies, tells. He found none. Falk wasn't manipulating him, not this time. The urgency in his stance was real. The tension around his eyes was real. Whatever had brought him here, it was serious. Finally, Riker exhaled. "All right," he said, "but Lena needs a ride home first." Lena blinked. "Riker, I'm fine, you don't need tea." "Yes," Falk interrupted, "she does." Both Lena and Riker looked at him. Falk nodded toward the crowd where several men, not police, not civilians, had begun appearing around the edges. Unmarked vests, subtle earpieces, controlled scanning of the perimeter. They weren't here for the 3 drunk guys. They were here for Riker. Or something connected to him. Falk lowered his voice. "There are too many eyes here, too many ears, and some of them aren't ours." Riker's blood ran cold. He looked at the men, forming a loose ring around the crowd. They weren't media. They weren't random. And they certainly weren't friendly. He stepped closer to Falk. "What did you bring to my doorstep?" Falk answered without blinking. "Something that was looking for you." A silence dropped between them, heavy, suffocating. Riker swallowed, the weight settling in. Whatever had been hunting him had just found him. And this was no longer about a street fair, or 3 drunk men, or viral videos. This was about something deeper. Something darker. And something Riker had tried very, very hard to leave behind. Why was the Admiral avoiding her eyes? Riker noticed it the moment they stepped away from the crowd. Falk's gaze stayed locked on the perimeter, scanning, analyzing, calculating. But whenever Bryn turned toward him, small fingers fidgeting around her balloon string, he looked away too quickly. Not out of annoyance, not out of coldness, out of something like guilt. Guilt made Riker's instincts prickle. They moved down a side street behind the fairgrounds, the noise fading into a distant hum. Lena walked beside them, still shaken but steady, Bryn clinging to her hand now instead of Riker. The Admiral's unmarked security detail spread out ahead of them, clearing a quiet corridor through the alley. Lena finally spoke. "So can someone explain why all of this is happening? Those men, those weren't regular officers." "No," Falk said. "That SUV," she continued. "The way you showed up, the way they're watching us." "No," Falk repeated, polite but firm. "They aren't regular." Riker's jaw tightened. "Start talking." Falk exhaled slowly, a man preparing to open a door he wished he could keep shut. "There's been chatter for months," he said quietly. "Fragments, bits of intel crossing desks that usually have nothing to do with each other, most of it vague, unconfirmed, but some threads kept pointing to you." "To me," Riker scoffed. "I haven't been active in 5 years." Falk nodded. "Which makes you harder to find, and that may be what they want." "Who is they?" Riker pressed. The Admiral didn't answer. Lena's hand tightened around Bryn's. "Does this have something to do with the attack?" Falk shook his head. "Those 3 idiots had nothing to do with this. Wrong place, wrong woman." Lena flinched at the reminder. Falk stepped closer to Riker. "But the people watching you now, they're not random. They've been in Clearwater for 3 days. We intercepted a communication this morning. They expected you to surface." I've been living a quiet civilian life, Riker said. I'm not on anyone's radar. But even as he said it, a cold truth settled under his skin. He was on someone's radar. He just didn't know who. Falk continued walking, forcing them forward. The moment that video hit social media, every network scraping your face lit up, some of them government, some of them not. Riker swallowed, meaning. Meaning, Falk replied slowly. Someone somewhere wanted proof you were still alive. Lena glanced at him, startled. Why wouldn't they think he was? Riker didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because there were operations he wasn't supposed to survive. Missions he wasn't supposed to return from. Black files sealed so deep that even some SEAL commanders would never read them. Things he had done for country, for team, for survival. Things the world wasn't equipped to understand. Things Bryn should never hear about. He glanced down at her, tiny, trusting, unaware. She squeezed his thumb lightly, her eyes fixed on his, searching for reassurance. He gave her a soft smile he didn't feel. Falk checked the alley again. We need to move. There's a safer place to talk. Riker's voice sharpened. I'm not stepping into another bunker. It's not a bunker. What is it then? Falk hesitated, a neutral site. Riker laughed under his breath, humorless. You don't have neutral sites. No, Falk agreed. I don't, but someone else does, someone who's been waiting for you. Riker stopped walking. Falk stopped too. Lena froze, holding Bryn instinctively. Riker's eyes locked onto Falk's. Who's waiting for me? Falk's expression tightened. Someone you know. Who? But before Falk could answer, Bryn tugged on Riker's sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, someone's watching us. Riker turned. At the edge of the alley stood a man in a charcoal windbreaker, hands in pockets, face shadowed by a cap, not aggressive, not approaching, just standing, observing. But the way he shifted his weight, the subtle readiness in his stance, was wrong. Riker reacted instantly, stepping in front of Bryn and Lena. Two of Falk's men moved toward the stranger. The stranger quietly walked backward, blended into the dispersing crowd, and vanished. Falk didn't look surprised, which made it worse. Keep moving, he ordered softly. Lena's breath trembled. How long has this been happening? Long enough, Falk said. But that wasn't an answer, and all three of them knew it. They reached the far corner of the street where another black SUV waited. Falk opened the rear door. Riker, Bryn goes in first. Riker lifted his daughter gently. Everything's okay, sweetheart. She shook her head. I don't like this. Neither did he. He placed her inside. She slid across the seat, clutching her dolphin balloon. Lena climbed in next, heart still pounding. When she sat, Bryn crawled instantly into her lap, seeking comfort. Riker lingered outside. Where are you taking us? He asked. Falk lowered his voice. A safe location. I want specifics. You'll see. No, Riker said. I need to know before I put my daughter inside. Falk hesitated, then said three words Riker wasn't expecting. She asked for you. Riker froze. Who? The Admiral held his gaze. You'll understand when we get there. She who? Riker demanded. Falk stepped closer, voice low. Someone who hasn't contacted anyone in years. Someone who disappeared off every grid we track. She resurfaced this morning. She gave one instruction. Bring Riker Cade, alive. Riker's pulse spiked, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Recognition. He knew one woman who could disappear that completely. One woman who could slip away from satellites, trackers, and entire intelligence networks. One woman who vanished 5 years ago, the same year he left the teams. A woman he once knew better than himself. And a woman he once mourned. Falk, Riker whispered, voice cracking. It's not. Falk nodded. It is. Riker stepped back, breath shallow, memories slamming into him harder than any punch. "You're lying," Riker said. But he knew Falk wasn't. "Get in the car," Falk said gently. Riker didn't move. His knees felt unsteady. His chest felt tight. The world spun in quiet circles around him, the street fading into background noise. 5 years of silence suddenly had meaning. 5 years of questions suddenly had an answer. 5 years of burying a ghost suddenly felt like a lie. Lena watched from inside the SUV, confused by whatever storm passed across Riker's face. Bryn whispered, "Daddy." He forced his breathing steady. Falk placed a hand on his shoulder. "Riker, she's alive." The words felt unreal. Impossible. Unfair. Riker swallowed hard. "Where is she?" Falk opened the door wider. "Waiting for you." Riker stood frozen, torn open by hope and dread. Years of grief battled against a small, fragile possibility he had never let himself entertain. And then quietly, like a broken prayer, he asked, "Why now?" Falk's answer was soft, heavy. "Because she says you're in danger." Riker closed his eyes. And then he climbed into the SUV. Why did the road feel too quiet? Riker had been in armored convoys before, dust storms, riot zones, ambushed roads where every shadow held teeth. But this silence was different. It wasn't fear. It wasn't calm. It was anticipation. The kind that made the air feel like stretched wire. Bryn sat between him and Lena, small hands fisted around her balloon string, eyes wide and uncertain. Every bump in the road made her flinch. She was trying to be brave, to match the calm she thought her father felt. But Riker wasn't calm. Not anymore. Across from them, Admiral Falk watched the city roll by through tinted glass, elbows on his knees, posture tight with thoughts he wasn't sharing. Riker finally spoke. "Where is she?" Falk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched Bryn, as if deciding how much to reveal in front of a child. Riker knew that look. He'd worn it himself 1,000 times, trying to shield innocence from realities that had no mercy. "Safe," Falk said finally. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now." Riker's jaw tensed. "Tell me where she is." Falk's eyes softened, a rare crack in his usual steel. "You of all people know her. She doesn't stay in one place long. She moved locations twice this morning alone." Lena glanced between them. "Who are you talking about?" Riker didn't look at her. He couldn't. The truth churned inside him, sharp and heavy. "You said she was dead," he said quietly to Falk. Falk didn't flinch. "That was the report. We all believed it." "I didn't," Riker whispered. Falk raised an eyebrow. "You buried her, Cade." "That wasn't her," Riker said. Lena stiffened slightly at that sentence. She didn't understand the history, couldn't, but she felt the weight of it. The SUV turned toward the outskirts of town, where the shops faded into industrial buildings and the traffic thinned. The air changed. Less laughter, more engine noise. Less color, more gray. Bryn leaned closer to him. "Daddy, is Mommy coming?" The question hit him like a blade between ribs. Lena looked away quickly, giving him space. Falk pretended not to hear, but his jaw flexed. He knew the story. He knew the pain. Riker lowered his head until his forehead touched Bryn's. "No, sweetheart, Mommy's still gone." Bryn nodded once, lips trembling, then hugged his arm. Her understanding was small, incomplete, but real. Falk's expression tightened. "She asked you not to tell Bryn." "I know. You going to honor that?" "I've honored worse requests," Riker murmured. The SUV slowed as it approached a long-abandoned cannery on the water's edge. Weeds overgrew rusted chain-link fences. Salt wind scraped over corrugated metal siding. Half the windows were shattered. Graffiti covered the loading bays like angry scars. Lena frowned. "This is the safe place." Falk nodded, for now. Riker didn't need to ask why. He felt it in his bones, the anonymity, the lack of foot traffic, the simple lines of sight. The kind of dead, forgotten place you could hide in without drawing attention. The SUV glided into a covered loading tunnel. The moment the doors shut behind them, an operator in plain clothes approached, checking IDs and visually scanning each passenger. Falk stepped out first, then Lena, then Bryn gripping Riker's hand like a lifeline. Riker stepped out last, eyes sweeping the shadows, reading movement, mapping exits. Old habits never died. Falk gestured for them to follow, this way. They moved through a dark corridor, illuminated only by flickering industrial lights. Lena stayed close, her breath shallow, heart beating too fast. Bryn pressed into Riker's leg with every step, balloon bumping gently against his hip. They reached a heavy steel door. Falk typed a code. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open. And Riker froze. The room wasn't large. Concrete walls, one table, two chairs, a single lamp glowing like a lighthouse in the dimness. But it was the figure standing in the center that made everything else disappear. A woman. Tall, dark hair braided down her back, shoulders squared in that familiar way, ready for anything, afraid of nothing. But it was her eyes that made Riker feel the ground tilt beneath him. Because he had seen those eyes in dreams, in nightmares, in memories that refused to fade, in photos he'd locked away because they hurt too much to look at. She turned. "Hello, Riker." Lena inhaled sharply. Bryn clutched him tighter. Falk stood back, silent, letting the moment unfold. Riker's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He took one step forward, fighting the tremor in his breath. "You're alive." She nodded, "I am." He swallowed, "How?" Her lips twitched, something between apology and regret. "The same way you survived things you weren't supposed to." He took another step, hands shaking slightly, a crack in the armor he didn't know he could still break. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why come back?" She hesitated. Falk answered instead, "Because she has intel." Riker's eyes didn't leave hers. "What intel?" The woman, her name still too heavy to say, looked him in the eyes, and for the first time since she turned around, he saw fear. Not fear of dying. Fear of losing something worse. "They're coming for you," she said. Bryn pressed her face into Riker's hip. Lena's fingers dug into her own palms. Falk stood straighter. Riker felt something old ignite inside him, the part of him that analyzed every threat, that calculated outcomes, that stepped into danger before the rest of the world even recognized it. "Who is?" he asked. The woman stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "The same people who faked my death." Riker's blood went cold. She swallowed hard. "And the same people who were following you at the street fair." Riker almost staggered. "You've known for how long?" Her eyes softened. 5 years. The air thickened. His jaw clenched. 5 years and you didn't tell me." "I couldn't," she said quietly. "If you knew I was alive, they would have known too, and they would have come sooner." Riker felt the weight of that truth, and the betrayal tangled beneath it. Bryn peeked up at the woman from behind her father's leg. "Who is she, Daddy?" Riker didn't answer. He couldn't find the words. The woman knelt slowly, lowering herself to Bryn's height, expression soft, voice trembling. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm—" "Stop," Riker said sharply. She froze. Lena turned, startled. Falk watched with a heavy sigh. Riker stepped between them, blocking her from Bryn. "You don't get to walk back into her life like that." The woman's eyes filled, pain flickering behind hardened survival. "I know," she whispered, "but I didn't come here for me." She lifted her gaze to his. "I came here because if we don't move now, you won't get to keep her safe." The words hit him harder than any explosion he'd weathered. Riker felt Bryn wrap both arms around his leg. He put a hand on her head, steadying her. Steadying himself. Lena stepped forward tentatively. What happens now? The woman looked at her. Then at Falk. Then at Riker. We run, she said. Riker narrowed his eyes. From who? She hesitated. Then spoke the name he never expected to hear again. The name he hoped he'd never have to face. The Palisade Group. Falk inhaled sharply. Lena froze. And Riker, after 5 years of trying to build a normal life, felt the world he built cracking beneath his feet. He'd survived war. He'd survived missions that killed better men. He'd survived heartbreak. He'd survived grief. But this was different. Because the last time he crossed paths with the Palisade Group, someone he loved died. Or so he thought. And now they were back. And this time, they were coming for his daughter. What do you do when the past you buried stands up and starts breathing again? Riker didn't have an answer, not one that made sense, not one he trusted. All he knew was that the room felt suddenly too small, as if the air itself held its breath. The woman he once loved. The woman he thought he buried. The woman he mourned. Now stood 3 feet away, alive. And terrified. Not of dying. Not of being found. But of him losing Bryn. That fear that was real. Riker felt Bryn's small fingers digging into his pant leg, seeking reassurance. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tension. Kids always did. Lena moved closer, almost protectively. She didn't know the history, but she sensed something raw in the room, something tangled, unfinished, dangerous. Admiral Falk finally broke the silence. The Palisade Group resurfaced 6 months ago, he said. Different name, different funding stream, but the same core leadership. Riker's eyes narrowed. They were dismantled. They adapted, Falk replied. The woman, her voice soft but razor-thin, added, and they're after you. Why? Riker asked. She looked at him like the answer hurt to say. Because you're the only operator who ever walked out of their black site alive. Lena stiffened in shock. Falk's jaw clenched. Bryn looked up at him, confused. Daddy, what's a black site? Riker inhaled slowly, a steadying breath he didn't feel. Something you never need to know, he said gently, brushing her hair back. Okay. She nodded, trusting him completely. The woman stepped forward, hands trembling slightly. Riker, they want revenge, and they want leverage. That means Bryn. Riker's blood chilled. Over my dead body, he murmured. They're counting on that, she replied. He met her eyes, eyes he once knew like his own. You should have told me you were alive. You should have told me what you knew. I couldn't, she whispered. The moment I made contact with you, they would have traced it. They monitor everything, every ping, every signal, every breach. I had to disappear completely. Her voice cracked. I wanted to come home, but if I did, they'd follow. And you'd never see your daughter grow up. Emotion gathered in her eyes, years of buried longing and guilt. It didn't soften him. Bryn deserved the truth, he said. So did you, she whispered, but truth gets people killed. Riker looked away, jaw tight. Lena shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't part of this past, but she was now woven into its consequences. Falk spoke again. We intercepted a message this morning. They know you live in Clearwater. They know Bryn's name. They were planning to take her today. Riker's chest tightened. Bryn's tiny hand squeezed his. They didn't expect you, Falk continued, looking at the woman. They thought you were still off-grid. When you surfaced, they panicked, shifted their timeline. That's why the men were watching us, Riker murmured. Not the drunk ones, Falk clarified. The watchers, the men at the fair, they were Palisade operatives. Lena's eyes widened, so they weren't there for me. The woman shook her head. No, They were waiting for Riker to react to something, anything. They needed confirmation he still had the instincts they remembered. Riker felt sick. "They used you as bait," he said quietly. Lena's hand flew to her chest, her voice cracked. "Oh my God." Bryn looked up again, voice small. "Daddy, are bad people coming?" Riker knelt, pulling her into his arms. He held her, gently, fiercely, carefully feeling her heartbeat against his chest. He brushed her hair back with a trembling hand. "Not while I'm here," he whispered. The woman's voice was soft, painful. "That's why we have to move, now." Falk nodded. "We'll transfer you to a secure site tonight. New identities, relocation, a plan to." "No," Riker said. Falk stiffened. "Cade." "I'm not running," Riker said, rising to his feet. "Not again, not this time." The woman swallowed. "Riker." "No," he repeated. "I'm not raising my daughter in safe houses and abandoned buildings. I gave up that life. I gave her stability. I won't take that from her." Falk folded his arms. "Then you'll get her killed." The words hit like a hammer. Bryn clung to him. Lena's eyes softened with worry. The woman winced, then whispered, "Riker, Falk is right. Palisade doesn't give warnings, they give body bags." "And I'm supposed to let them chase us forever?" he asked. "Let them dictate our lives, control our movement, our fear?" No one answered. Because the truth was simple. Palisade didn't stop. Didn't negotiate. Didn't forget. They erased threats. Riker passed Bryn gently to Lena, then stepped toward Falk and the woman. "You know me," he said quietly. "Both of you, you know what I'm willing to do when my daughter is threatened." Falk's expression darkened. "Don't say it." "I'm ending this," Riker said. The woman exhaled shakily. "You don't even know how big they are now." "I know enough," he replied. Falk shook his head. "Riker, Palisade isn't a man or a building. They're a multinational black network. Contractors, ghost accounts. They don't fear governments, let alone one man." "Then they don't know the right man," Riker said. Silence stretched. Lena spoke softly. "Riker, what if there are too many?" Riker didn't answer immediately. He looked at Bryn, her little face buried in Lena's shoulder, balloons still bobbing with every shaky breath. He looked at the woman who'd come back from the dead just to warn him. He looked at Falk, the man who'd once ordered him into hell and now looked genuinely afraid. And then he spoke. "I've spent 5 years trying to be normal, trying to be quiet, trying to be the man Bryn deserves. The world didn't let me. Palisade didn't let me." His voice steadied. "So I'm done hiding. I'm done running." Falk stepped forward. "What exactly do you think you're going to do?" Riker's eyes sharpened, the old combat clarity returning like muscle memory. "I'm going to find the head of Palisade." The woman inhaled sharply. Falk shook his head. "You don't even know who that is." Riker nodded. "I do now." The woman's eyes softened, haunted. "You always were stubborn." "And you always underestimated me," Riker said softly. Bryn lifted her head from Lena's shoulder. "Daddy, can we go home now?" Riker turned toward her and gave her a soft, steady smile. "Yeah, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're going home." The woman's eyes filled, not with anger but with something like pride. Falk stepped closer. "Cade, if you walk out of this building, you're walking into a war." Riker nodded once. "Then I'll walk quietly." The woman swallowed hard. "You won't be alone." He met her eyes. For the first time in 5 years, they held the same purpose. Lena looked between them, fear and awe mingling in her gaze. "What about us?" Riker placed a hand on her shoulder. "You take Bryn home, keep her inside, lock everything. I'll be there soon." "And you?" she asked, voice trembling. Riker turned toward the door. "I'm done being hunted," he said softly. "Time to hunt back." Falk exhaled, defeated. "Cade." Riker didn't turn. He opened the door, stepped into the dim hallway. and didn't look back. Some men raised their voice to prove their strength. Some men raise their fists. Some men raise hell. Riker Cade. He simply walked. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.